Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a Springfield Armory Hellion, aka an HS Produkt VHS-2 semi-automatic rifle, now being imported into the US for commercial sale here. This is something that a lot of people were looking forward to. A lot of people wondered why this hadn't happened before, but it has happened now. So there are a couple things to talk about here. One is, I thought bullpups were old-style technology. The answer is actually not really. There's a whole second wave of bullpups that have been coming in a military sense, and I want to talk about that. But first, a brief touch on the manufacturer. So this is being imported by Springfield under the name Hellion. Springfield Armory is a commercial company in the United States, no longer has any ties to the original military arsenal, Springfield. But they have had a very profitable and satisfactory and long-running relationship with this company, this manufacturer, HS Produkt in Croatia. HS Produkt makes the Springfield XD pistols, the whole line of XDs. And it's in a very successful pistol in the United States. And HS Produkt has grown into a remarkably competent, well-developed, well-thought-out firearms manufacturing company in a country that basically nobody thinks of as a hotbed of modern small arms development, that being Croatia. So the development of this begins with the Croatian Civil War. Croatia had a pretty nasty civil war with Serbia. As a result of their civil war, both during and after, there was an imperative to develop a domestic small arms industry to actually equip Croatian military forces and just provide an element of national defense that can only be had by actually having your own small arms manufacturing domestically within the country. And in fact, HS Produkt does all of their manufacturing in-house. They do all their polymers, they do the metals. It is the whole gun gets developed without subcontracted or outsourced parts, and that's actually a pretty substantial benefit for the company for being able to adapt and refine and develop a firearm like this. So during the Civil War, the company was initially IM Metal. It changed its name to HS Produkt later on, and we actually went through two different versions of the VHS rifles. So the first pattern of VHS was in development from about 2001 or so. It was first patented in Europe. The critical elements of it were patented in 2005, and it was released onto the market or went into production in 2007. It was purchased in limited numbers by the Croatian military. It is a rifle that took very significant cues from the FAMAS, although it was not a delayed blowback system, but the original VHS looks very much like a FAMAS with a big carry handle out here. Similar buttstock. It's a bullpup rifle, as is the VHS-2. VHS-1 had some issues. It wasn't a fully matured design. One of the things that was developed as part of the improvement or innovation involved in the VHS was in particular a really interesting patent for a gas impingement system that would not just operate the bolt, but also direct some gas around behind the bolt to essentially create a pressurized buffer that would help decelerate the bolt after it had finished cycling, or after it had finished opening, to reduce the felt recoil of the rifle. This is a patent that got some attention when it was filed. A lot of people jumped on it, like, hey, look, this little small country or small company in a small country is doing some really interesting, innovative things. Ultimately, though, that system turned out it was just too complex and not worth the effort of trying to build it into a production rifle, and never actually went into production, but it got a lot of attention. What did instead eventually go into production after a couple thousand VHS rifles was the VHS-2, with completely redesigned and really a remarkably modular, efficient, and impressive gun for a country that a lot of people have never, frankly, a lot of people have probably never even heard of, much less paid much attention to. So the VHS-2 in this form came on the market in 2014. It has been adopted in larger numbers by the Croatian military. It was also adopted by the Iraqi military, interestingly. It was tested by a bunch of other places, including being tested by the French. This is actually a rifle that came in second place to the HK416 in French military trials. And I will point out that that is an overall score that includes things like cost, as well as actual reliability and service performance in shooting tests. I had a chance to actually shoot some of the French trials VHS-2 rifles, and they're really quite impressive guns. And what's really cool about Springfield's Hellion here is that it's virtually the exact same thing. They've made a couple of changes for importability. Those include the muzzle brake, the handguard, the pistol grip, and probably a few other things that aren't entirely obvious to me at this point. But the meat and potatoes of the rifle are exactly like they are on the military rifles. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this and talk about why bullpups are making a second comeback and how this one actually works. All right, there it is. It is the Hellion, imported by Springfield Armory. They do also have to include the original manufacturer's information. So here on the left side, we have Hellion HS Produkt, made in Croatia. On the military rifles, this differs in that it says VHS-2. And by the way, we'll give just a moment for the VHS Betamax jokes to die down to a dull roar. Springfield has their marking up here as well. This is another point where there would, on a military rifle, there would be a VHS style of marking up here. And once again, the same thing on the opposite side. Man, that's cool. I can actually fit the entire thing in the camera frame because, of course, it is a bullpup. So we have a 16-inch barrel on this. This is a semi-auto version of the VHS K2. They do also make the D2, which has a 20-inch barrel. Springfield opted to go with the shorter barrel. Probably makes sense. For comparison's sake, my What Would Stoner Do carbine here also has a 16-inch barrel, and if I line the buttstocks up, you can see the difference in overall length. So you do save quite a lot of space with a bullpup. One of the things I really like about this is that everything on this rifle is completely ambidextrous. So the trigger obviously is. We have a selector switch here. It's two position, but otherwise the exact same selector switch that you would get on the military rifles, so safe and fire. It is a little bit of a reach to get to it. That's one of my sort of little complaints about the rifle. But if I flip it over, we have the same selector switch on the opposite side, so ambidextrous. The charging handle is non-reciprocating, and it's a G36 style of charging handle where you can pull it out to either side to use. So again, ambidextrous. And then back here, we have both our bolt release and magazine release. So the magazine release is there. It is a rear push button. Now it's actuating an AR style release button right up on this side. So this takes standard Stanag mags like that 20 rounder. In fact, what I'll do is just lock the bolt open. I have this one set up to be left-handed naturally. With the bolt locked open, you can then, obviously, you would take out your magazine, you can load in a new loaded magazine, and you have an ambidextrous bolt release right here. You take this lever and pull it back. And that allows the bolt to close. So literally everything on here, ambidextrous. I will also point out a profusion of sling attachment points. We've got something there, QD slots here and here, another QD slot up there, another loop up there, and all of these are duplicated on both sides of the rifle. HS opted to give this rifle an adjustable length of pull, which is interesting to me. It's not really that necessary because the length of pull is really pretty darn long to begin with, but you can push down this lever and adjust the butt plate in and out. Now this is under tension from the mainspring, so it is essentially spring-loaded. You push it in to the point where you want it, let it snap into position. That sets your length of pull. The trigger is frankly kind of bullpuppy. It's a little, like, there's a long take up here, and it's squishy. There we go, and doesn't have a very crisp let off. It also has a pretty long reset. So I would equate it to like equivalent to a typical mil-spec AR trigger. I would love to see a nice, fancy, high-quality trigger come out for this, and I think that should be feasible because of the way that the trigger mechanism itself is actually built, which we'll get to in just a moment. Last couple of elements on the outside, we have a Bcm grip here that has storage built into it, so the bottom of the grip opens up. And there is an American-made front end on here for import requirements that is set up with a bunch of M-LOK. So you've got M-LOK slots, well, here, here, and on the other side. So you can set up lasers, lights on the side, bipod on the bottom, laser light on the bottom, whatever you like. You've got plenty of M-LOK space to put accessories on there. On top of course, a full-length Picatinny rail on the top, which even includes a really nice set of built-in iron sights. So these are locked in place until you press the button. They're zeroable. They're metal, a nice hooded post for the front. I can't flip the rear one up because I've got my scope in the way there, but a 5-position aperture rear sight. It is adjustable for windage. You've got really good iron sights on this. Like, you wouldn't even need to go get any sort of optic to run on this rifle. This could run very nicely just on the iron sight. It's got a nice long sight radius, even though it is a bullpup. Now let's take a look at disassembly. I know you guys are going to get a kick out of this because it's pretty slick. So we've got a whole bunch of push pins. These are captive pins. So there's one for the buttstock. Pull that out. It's going to lock in place there. And I can take out the buttstock. There's the recoil spring. And this right there is your adjustable length of pull area. Next up, I'm just going to grab the charging handle and use this to pull the operating components out. So that is our bolt and carrier. Nice and easy. The trigger pack is a modular unit, very much to me like a Steyr AUG. So there's a little detent here. I'm going to push that in, and then I can pop the fire control box out. So there's the fire control box. When I said I think it's feasible for these guns to have a better aftermarket trigger, a big part of that is because the whole thing is modular right there. Next up, I'm just going to pull out the mag well because I can do that. This one's a much tighter pin, but there we go. I can pull out the magazine well. So this is set up for a variety of different mag wells. Obviously, the Stanag one is what we all want here because that is by far the most common. In the Croatian military, these actually use G36 mags, and so they have a G36 mag well. They even did make a FAMAS mag well for them for the French trials. And by the way, I would love to get my hands on a FAMAS mag well just for kicks, but pull that out. The front handguard is very easy to take off. Once again, one captive pin. Handguard comes off. It's held in place with a pair of lugs right here, and then locks into the frame on the bottom and pins in place. The optics rail, the whole upper rail assembly here, also comes off. Obviously, this is held in place a little bit differently to make sure that it can retain proper zero. We have a big old button here. So I should say first you have to take off the bottom handguard, and then if I push that button in, I can then, there we go, slide this, there we go, off right there. So it locks around this lug in this hook, connected nice and solidly to the barrel there, and then it locks into this locking slot back here against a metal block. So this unit gives you your charging handle assembly right there. That's non-reciprocating, and then whatever optics you have decided to mount on top. We can go a little bit farther here because why not? I should point out that this has a 2-position gas regulator, N for normal. If I push that in, I can rotate it to S for suppressed. The military ones that I looked at actually only had two settings. Those, well, one for normal shooting and one completely cut off for rifle grenades. So we can go ahead and pull out those two pieces there, and then there's the front of the gas piston, which I should probably clean off at this point. And then this, you actually have to take out some screws to take off, but that's fine because we really don't need to take that off at this point. So gas comes up through the gas block here, through the regulator. It's going to fill up a chamber up here, which pushes this backwards. That impinges on this, which is the gas piston, the op rod, you could say, on the bolt carrier, and that is going to shove this whole thing back. Now, we do have another interesting element here. This looks a bit different than some of the AR-18 style bolts you might have been used to seeing. Now, to take the bolt out, we have one pin here, which is just sort of held in place by a rubber gasket there, and of course, when this is installed in the gun, there's no place for the pin to go. So I just need to give that a little bit of a pop there. And then I can pull it out right here. See the rubber gasket right there. Then I can pull this spring down. I can pull out, sorry, pull that spring up, pull out our firing pin and its return spring. Now my cam pin will come out. I'm just going to drop that off. We're not used to cam pins being sort of crooked. Well, the reason for that here is you can install that cam pin in two different directions. So if you want the rifle to eject that direction, you set up the bolt like this. If you want it to eject that direction, you set it up like that. And you'll note that in both cases, there is a nice cutout for the cam pin. So that is our right hand eject. That is our left hand eject. And the cam pin can either go in that way or flip it around and it can go in that way. That is essentially how the ambidextrous, the swapping capability is done in the VHS. So this is really as simple of a system as swapping around the FAMAS. But what makes it even more useful than the FAMAS is this really significant cheek piece. So brass gets ejected pretty much straight out the side of the gun. As long as you keep your face behind this angled section on the cheek rest or even up to it, you may get brass very close to your face, but it can't actually come back and hit you. And this allows you to have a very good tactile feel of where to have your face so that you can very easily shoot left or right-handed, regardless of which side the gun is ejecting from. Now, if you are going to go ahead and switch the ejection side, as we've just been looking at, essentially there are two identical ejection ports here. And in order to swap them, we're just going to pull the cheek piece back. There we go, pop it up, get it out of the way. There's nothing here, but on this side, we have this little pin. So I'm going to take that pin out. Now, this ejection port can also open. Flip the gun over. Now, we can take this pin, get the diagonal side there, close the dust cover that we want to lock closed, and this pin just runs right through it there and locks that dust cover closed. This one is left, allowed to open up, and now you're going to be ejecting out this side, assuming you set the bolt up that way. And there you have a Springfield Hellion, aka a semi-auto HS Produkt VHS-2 Bullpup, fully field stripped. What I really like about this, and frankly, this is exactly what I said about the military VHS-2s when I got a chance to look at them a couple months ago, is that this rifle is finally really well thought out. We've had a whole lot of bullpup rifles that have some critical deficiencies to them. And the most common one was not being able to easily swap the thing from shoulder to shoulder. That has become sort of an accepted requirement of a modern military rifle, that in tactical situations, it needs to be able to to shoot from left or right side on demand. And some of the early generation bullpups some of them had no ability to shoot left-handed whatsoever. The British L-85 is an example of that. Some of them had the ability to be changed to left-handed, but it took a bunch of extra parts and some time, and you basically sent the thing into the armorer to do it, like the Steyr AUG. Some of them could actually be quite easily swapped from left to right, like the French FAMAS, but we're not talking about a procedure that can be done when you come up to a corner of a building in a firefight and decide, oh, I want to shoot from the right shoulder or the left instead now. Even a number of the more modern bullpups, things like the Tavor, don't offer that capability. There's some talk about, well, if you hold it just right and you push it forward enough and put your chin in the right place, then you won't eat the brass if you're shooting it wrong-handed. Well, the VHS is one of a relatively small number of bullpups that have actually gone a step further, and there is no hitch to shooting this thing from the opposite shoulder. You just swap shoulders and you can shoot it fine, regardless of which side it's set to eject out of. The FS-2000, or the F-2000, was like this, although it used a far more complicated system of forward ejection. And then there are a number of more commercial bullpups that have made attempts at doing the same thing. The Desertec MDR and the Keltec RFB and RDBs do this. What appeals to me about the VHS here, the Hellion, is that it is actually a gun that has a military procurement cycle behind it, development cycle. This isn't something that is being released sort of in the quasi-beta stage by a commercial company. It's something that's actually gone through significant maturation and iteration to get to the point where it is now. And I don't think that one needs to consider oneself a beta tester for this rifle, because this is pretty well proven out already. Anyway, that's gone rather long-winded about something that I think is actually one of the really cool bullpups on the market today. I love me my FAMAS, but man, there's no way for the FAMAS to mount optics, and this thing was built with optics right in mind. So I shouldn't say there's no way. There's no good way to mount optics on a FAMAS. Let me clear that up before I get bombarded in the comments on it. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and take this thing out to the range tomorrow, both some fun shooting at the range and also a bit of competition at the two-gun match. So stick around tomorrow to check that out, and thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this half of the video on the Hellion. I think that's all I got. Let's go shooting.